is defined here as something that we do. It's not conceptual, not just say, I love you in a whimsical kind of a way. We show it in how we treat someone, how we act towards someone. And such service, such devotion must be ahoitaki yapratihata, unmotivated, which means it's not about give me a BMW. And it is very surprising, isn't it? You walk into a temple, a church, a mosque, and you go up to the altar and you ask for a BMW. And there's no mortgage arrangements, there's no payment involved. You can't approach anyone else on the planet like that, and ask for stuff. But anyway, so it's unmotivated. And that, of course, we understand that that's what love has to be love. It has to be without the idea of return on our investment. It's not a business arrangement. It's something we do because we genuinely have feeling. And uninterrupted, so again, it's not something we do on a Tuesday evening or a Friday night. It comes from the heart, it's consistent. In order to completely satisfy the self, now that captured me. This is about love of the Supreme, so that the self, so that the heart can be completely satisfied. So unless we're satisfied in our heart, why are we doing it? We should do something else. So it's that promise was kind of, oh wow. This, because in the Christianity that I was understanding, it was just give with no expectation of return. Fair enough. But at what point do you become satisfied?
Mukam karoti vachalam pangum langhayate girim yat kripa tamaham vande paramananda madhavam. I was supposed to introduce my dear friend Sri Shaunaka Rishi Das. Most of it has been already done. But still, I'll just read once more for some of the people who were not here earlier. Shaunaka Rishi Das is the founding director of the Oxford Center for Hindu Studies. He is a Hindu cleric, a lecturer, and a broadcaster. He is the first Hindu Chaplain to Oxford University, and in this capacity is currently a visiting professor at the Vrije University, Amsterdam. He was a member of the Commission on Religion and Belief in British Public Life, convened in 2013 by the Woolf Institute, Cambridge. In 2013, the Indian government appointed him to sit on the International Advisory Council on the Auroville Foundation, a position he held until 2017. He is a trustee of FaithInvest UK and Bhaktivedanta College, Belgium. He also served as chair of the Northern Ireland Interfaith Forum, 1998 to 2002, and a trustee of the Interfaith Network UK, 2002 to 2004. The subject on which he will be speaking shortly is Srimad Bhagavatam or Bhagavata Mahapurana. Friends, in our Vedic tradition, Bhagavata Purana is arguably the most popular work after the Ramayana and the Mahabharata. Perhaps for the first time in this book, life of a child psychology is dealt with in the life of little Krishna. We never come across the life of Krishna. We don't come across about life of Krishna in any earlier literature, though it appears here and there in Harivamsha a little bit, afterwards in Vishnu Purana, but in detail it only appears in the Srimad Bhagavatam. That's the influence which has taken Krishna to every nook and cranny of the world. This Krishna is pure love, universal love personified. The love that binds people, the love that hurts no one. The love, the root of which is in bhakti, devotion, and jnana. And the book Srimad Bhagavatam, once people read that, they will come to know how beautifully all this has been dealt with by Vedavyasa, whom we consider is the composer of this great Purana. I am so happy that my dear friend, Sri Shaunaka Rishi Das, is going to introduce this. Now, I invite Sri Shaunaka Rishi Das to please come and introduce the work. Thank you. Namaste.
Thank you very much, Nandakumarji, for your lovely introduction. I'll start with a little mantra. Sri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swaha Padantikam. It's usual when you're discussing a book like this to start with a little mantra of some kind. The Bhagavat Purana is one of 18 Puranas, so we might think, well, it's only one of 18. It's not the oldest Purana. The Purana means, as everyone who understands an Indian language, means old. And they're histories. That's the idea, that these are histories. But the Bhagavat Purana has emerged out of the Puranas as the most influential by far and the most enduring by far. You still find all over India big signposts advertising Bhagavat Kathas, recitations of the Bhagavat that take place over 7 days. This seems like a big commitment, but you can have up to 150 of such kathas here in the UK on an annual basis. What to speak of in India, and in North America, and in Australasia, and even in the Middle East. So this is very much a living tradition. You don't have kathas like this for the other Puranas. And the other Puranas aren't as what we might call coherent as the Bhagavat Purana. The Bhagavat Purana, a lot of scholars, when they start dealing with the text, they come to a point where they say, oh, this has been inserted at a later date. No scholar has ever said this about the Bhagavat Purana, and this is very surprising, because this is a text of 14,500 verses. And if you look at the critical edition, go back to the oldest editions, no one is taking out or putting in shlokas. It's a surprisingly coherent text. And a friend of mine, Dr. Kenneth Velpe in Oxford, said one time it seemed to him like a symphony in 12 movements, because there are 12 books. And the first chapter of the first book is the overture. It's like the introduction to everything. And he said a lot of people just listen to the overture and they think they've heard the Bhagavat. But you have to go through all the movements, because it's a piece of literature in terms of its poetry, its philosophy, and quite dense philosophy. It's theology, because it's about God. And it's also architecture and temple worship. What we understand of temple worship essentially comes from the Bhagavat. Temple music, dance, and poetry. A lot of the phenomena that we know of Indian music, dance, and poetry actually comes from temples and is inspired by the Bhagavat. Politics of India, the economics of India, the mindset, the environmental theory, social theory, it's all found in the Bhagavat. And Bollywood. It's the most influential scriptural or literary text in India on Bollywood. How do you represent religion in a Bollywood movie? There's going to be music and dancing, obviously. That's very Bhagavat. It's going to be a festival. That's the Bhagavat. There's going to be murtis involved. That's the Bhagavat. There's going to be puja involved. That's the Bhagavat. Everything about it shows the influence of this text on Indian culture. And whereas the Mahabharata and Ramayana, particularly maybe the Ramayana, have had a huge influence across South Asia, not just in India, but well beyond India, to countries who lay claim to the text as their own. It's so important to them. The Bhagavat has had an influence, not only a broad influence, but a deep influence in India itself. And I would argue, only because this argument has been made to me by quite a number of elderly Indian scholars who I've met over the years, that in their opinion the Bhagavat is the most influential text in Indian culture. And Indian civilization, I would use the word, most of these elderly scholars referred to Indian civilization. And I think that's the proper word to use. It's reworked in every major Indian religion. You have the Narayaniyam down south. You have in Maharashtra, they focus on the 11th book and they develop it from there. So the significant religious traditions of most of the regions of India have come out of the Bhagavat. And it's developed a commentarial tradition. Everyone feels like they have to comment on it, they have to explain it. There are more than 100 commentaries, 44 of them are major commentaries, but more than 100 commentaries. Of the Mahabharata, there are 2. So this has attracted everyone's attention. And as Nandakumara said, it's about Krishna. When you go to the 10th book, the 10th book is a huge book. It's not just a normal chapter. It's a huge book. It's 1/3 of the whole text, and it talks about Krishna. So immediately you think this is a Vaishnav text, this is a sectarian text. But in actual fact, the Advaitin traditions are some of the biggest commentators on the Bhagavat. The Bhagavat is owned by every tradition. Nobody ignores it. Everyone wants to comment on it. Everyone wants to be a part of it because it's so multifaceted. But I want to just look at the Bhagavat from 3 perspectives. One is philosophy, one is poetry. I'll do it fairly quickly. And the other is love, which is Bhakti in the Bhagavat. I mention philosophy because it's important, because in the Western mindset, in scholarship in the West, we separate philosophy from theology. So thinking and God are 2 different things. Religion and science are 2 different things. India has never done that intellectually. And India has a very highly developed intellectual tradition, but that tradition hasn't entered into dialogue with the Western Academy in any profound form as of yet. But I think it can do, and I think it needs to, because the Indian mindset cannot understand how you can separate the head from the heart. And in his introduction, Nandakumara said that there's bhakti in the Bhagavat, and there's also gyan, knowledge. So philosophy and the idea of devotion sit very comfortably together because they're part of the whole rubric of life. They're part of how we operate as individuals, as human beings. It's how we operate as families. It's how we operate as societies. No one gets married by getting out a list and saying, reasons to get married, a joint bank account. That's a good idea. Nobody, you're in a venue somewhere and you look across the room and you see someone and all of a sudden, batum, batum. And that's the beginning of the process. And it's as irrational as you're ever going to get it. And you're going to make maybe the most profound decision of your life, usually at a very strangely early age, based on katum katum from the heart. The head kicks in practically immediately, where you want to, is my hair combed? How's my breath? You know, all the logistics, the tactics of how to proceed in the world. So this idea of philosophy and theology, of devotion and knowledge working together, this is, it's a wonderful paradigm. In fact, the paradigm is called Bhakti, Gyan, Karma. It's devotion, knowledge, and work. These 3 things influence each other equally, and they have to be balanced. If you take the Bhakti side out, if you take the heart out, if we call them feely, doey, thinky, just to make it simple. So if you take the feeling part out, then you've got action that's dictated simply by rational thought. eugenics becomes a very interesting option. The whole experiment of organizing civilization on the Soviet model or the fascistic model is a no-brainer if there's no compassion, no tolerance, no love, no humility. If you put these things in and you take out the rational side, then you get a very sentimental society, where it's actually quite easy to go and explain to someone how the right thing to do is to go and kill that person because that's the best thing to do for the betterment of everybody else. And rational thought doesn't enter into it. So this idea of a philosophical basis, and every theology in India has a philosophical basis, and the Bhagavat makes this quite clear in the very first text of the 14,500. The very first words of the Bhagavat are Janmad Yasya Yataha. That this is a direct quote from the Upanishads, a direct quote from the Vedanta Sutra, the book that is the natural commentary on the Upanishads. So it's connecting itself immediately with this tremendous body of rational Jnanic literature. And at the end of that verse, it says, Satyam Param Dhimahi. Dhimahi is a word only used in a Vedic context. Anyone who knows the Gayatri Mantra knows this word. So it's identifying itself with the Upanishads and with the Vedas. So it's not saying the past is rubbish, let's leave it behind. It's saying the past is very important. We all build on the past, let's move on. It's giving tremendous respect. It's very holistic, very respectful, but also very intelligent approach, I would suggest. The second verse says something that I find very interesting. It's very radical. It's a very radical statement. Dharma prayochita kaiva totra. It says that this text, this Bhagavat, completely rejects all religious activity that is materially motivated. So it's saying that religion, on the whole, is materially motivated. I'm a good boy. I do good things so that I can go to heaven. What's that? That's purely selfish. So it's actually looking at all the rituals we do and what's spiritual, shall we say? What's beyond the self about that? And it says it's the highest truth is reality distinguished from illusion for the welfare of all. This is a very non-sectarian statement. Very interesting start to any text. It's being crystal clear about where it's coming from. We're not interested in material religion. We're not interested in talking about it. We're looking at reality as distinguished from illusion for the welfare of all. So what is real? It's the idea of sat. What is real? Very important idea that comes directly from the Vedas. And then further on in the second chapter, Vedanti tadva vedas tadvam yad jnanam advayam brahmeti paramatmati bhagavaniti subjete. It says, those who are learned know the truth, know this reality, in its non-dual substance to be manifest as Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan. Now, as we know in India, there's all these discussions about whether you're a personalist or an impersonalist, whether you're into Bhakti or you're into Gyan, and this is saying that's not an intelligent conversation to have, because it's all of these things. So it's Brahmati, Paramatmati, Bhagavaniti, Shabjate. These are the subjects of discussion. This is how you should look at the whole thing holistically, rejecting none. If you want to look at reality, you can't snip out a part of reality that you don't like. So again, this is very non-sectarian. It's a very broad-minded approach to inquiry. And this is part of the Indian intellectual tradition. And then, after I've said that about non-sectarianism, in the third chapter, it says, Krishnastu Bhagavan Swayam. This is a chapter that has described all the incarnations. Now, as we know, there are 10 incarnations of Vishnu, but that's not what the Bhagavatam says. That idea of 10 came much later. There are many incarnations. The whole idea is that we can't limit the unlimited. If God is unlimited, then you can't just say 10, that's your lot. That's all we can cope with, us poor human minds. So having explained all these things, how God manifests in the world in multifarious ways, some forms are human, some are male, some are female, some are animals, some are fish. God can do whatever God likes. It's making an important point. It says, Krishnastu Bhagavan Swayam. Krishna is the supreme Bhagavan, the supreme manifestation of all this. So that's a very, again, dynamic statement, having said this is open inquiry, but we're saying that this is the ultimate truth that you're going to find. But it's not demanding that it's the only way you can understand truth. And with that, I'd like to go to Queen Kunti. Queen Kunti is the mother of the Pandavas, and she has prayers in the very beginning of the Bhagavatam that I think are very beautiful and are looked over. I mean, we talk about India as a patriarchal society. Not if you've ever been to an Indian house for a meal, where the mother just tells everyone what to do, what to eat, and when to eat, and everyone just does it. She says, again, this was 40-something years ago when I first came across Janma Ishvara Shruta Shribir Edadam Hamanam Madhapunam Narvahatya Vihitam Vai Twama Kinchana Gocharam. He says, my Lord, you can be easily approached, but only by those who are materially exhausted. So this is going back to the idea of we're not dealing with material religion here. If you're materially exhausted, if you've given up looking for happiness in the material context, then it's very easy to understand that there might be something else. And he says, one who is on the path of material progress, trying to improve themselves with respectable parentage, great opulence, high education, and bodily beauty cannot approach you with sincere feeling, because half their brain is somewhere else. It's a very interesting place for someone to come in their thinking. And for Queen Kunti, she'd been through the material context and she'd experienced all of these things, and they meant nothing. Even though she had good parentage, she was beautiful, she was well educated, still people were trying to kill her. And so she made a different choice in her life. I would like to mention about the poetry of the Bhagavatam as a piece of literature is quite astounding. It's actually very difficult Sanskrit for most Sanskritists. You have to be a bit of a kavi to really get into the Sanskrit of the Bhagavatam. But I'd like to do something a little extraordinary. I'd like to quote a text from the teachings of Prahlad Maharaj in the 7th canto. I'd like to sing it for you with an Irish tune, just because I can. But just to give you an idea of the poetry and how transferable this is. Matirna Krishna Paratak Swatova Mito Bepadyeta Griha Vitanam Adanta Gobir Vishitam Tamishram Puna Punascharvita Charvinanam. Yay. I used to have a better voice many years ago. See, I'm a strange Irishman. I never drank, and I'm sure if I drank, I'd have a much more mellow voice. But another piece of poetry, this is an English translation, a prose translation of the shlokas. But even in the prose translation, you can hear the poetry. So this is from the descriptions, the gopis, and they're listening to Krishna's flute in the 10th canto, and they're hearing the flute, and they're seeing how the flute is affecting everything, this sound from Krishna. It says, another gopi said to her friends, my dear friends, the cows are also charmed as soon as they hear the transcendental sound of the flute of Krishna. It sounds to them like the pouring of nectar, and they immediately spread their long ears just to catch the liquid nectar of the flute. As for the calves, they are seen with the teats of their mothers pressed in their mouths, but they cannot suck the milk. They remain struck with devotion, and tears glide down from their eyes, illustrating how vividly they are embracing Krishna heart to heart. Beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. And that's just an English translation of the Sanskrit. And of course, the Sanskrit is so much more beautiful. And then to the final aspect that I wanted to talk about, the idea of love, the idea of bhakti. Now, bhakti, bhaj, the root of the word, it only refers to love of the supreme. It's not the love of the paramour or love of a husband and wife. It's the love of the supreme. But the idea is that if you understand, if you have an experience of this love, then we have the capacity to love anyone. Then love becomes possible. This is the idea. So again, in the very first book, in the very first chapter, in fact, it says a very famous text. I first read this when I was 18 years old, and this captured my heart, I must say. Sa vaipum samparo dharmo yato bhakti radhokshaje ahoitakiya pratihata yayatma suprasidati. The supreme dharma, supreme occupation for all humanity, is that by which one can attain loving devotional service unto the Lord. Such devotional service must be unmotivated and uninterrupted in order to completely satisfy the self. This was for me as a young 18-year-old Irishman, and I was interested in religion. This is what I wanted to pursue in my life. I wanted to understand particularly love of God. And here I was reading a text that was older than the Christianity I was born with, and describing love, defining love and religion at the same time. So what religion is this talking about? It's not materially motivated. It's the supreme occupation to attain loving service to the Lord. So love is defined here as something that we do. It's not conceptual, not just say, I love you in a whimsical kind of a way. We show it in how we treat someone, how we act towards someone. And such service, such devotion must be ahoitaki yapratihata, unmotivated, which means it's not about give me a BMW. And it is very surprising, isn't it? You walk into a temple, a church, a mosque, and you go up to the altar and you ask for a BMW. And there's no mortgage arrangements, there's no payment involved. You can't approach anyone else on the planet like that, and ask for stuff. But anyway, so it's unmotivated. And that, of course, we understand that that's what love has to be love. It has to be without the idea of return on our investment. It's not a business arrangement. It's something we do because we genuinely have feeling. And uninterrupted, so again, it's not something we do on a Tuesday evening or a Friday night. It comes from the heart, it's consistent. In order to completely satisfy the self. Now that captured me. This is about love of the supreme, so that the self, so that the heart can be completely satisfied. So unless we're satisfied in our heart, why are we doing it? We should do something else. So it's that promise was kind of, oh wow. Because in the Christianity that I was understanding, it was just give with no expectation of return. Fair enough. But at what point do you become satisfied? That what you're doing is fine. So you develop self-esteem from the process, self-confidence from the process. This is a very profound text that opened up the idea of love. What are we talking about? And this is seen in the prayer of Kunti that I quoted, in the story of Dhruva Maharaj. Throughout the Bhagavatam, you look at it takes you on a journey through the different books, different stories of different people engaging with God in different ways. Dhruva was a 5-year-old boy. He was the son of a king, but he wasn't the first son of a king, and his wife wasn't the favored wife, because the king obviously had many wives, because that's the way kings are. And he wanted to be his father's favorite, and he couldn't be because that was just his karma. But he wasn't going to give in, so he met the sage Narada Muni, and the sage Narada Muni thought he was a great little chap, and said, yes, you should go and see God about this desire you have to be his favorite. And so he didn't know where to see God, so he went to his mother, who knew everything, and he said, where do I find God? He said, I don't know, all the sages go to the forest. So he went to the forest. Little 5-year-old kid goes off to the forest, but he's a kshatriya, full of vim. And he went to the forest and he met a sage there, and the sage gave him some austerities to do, and he became so proficient at these austerities that he began to suck energy from the whole universe. And all the devas were going, what's going on? I'm losing my power. I can't let the wind blow, and the rains aren't falling. So they went to Brahma and said, what's going on? He said, well, it's this little chap in the forest. So Brahma went to him and said, what do you want? And he says, I want to meet God so that he can make me, my father's favorite. He says, well, I'll arrange for you to meet God. So he went to Vishnu and said, can you help us? There's this kid in the forest. He's freaking us out. So they went to the forest with Vishnu appeared to him. And he looked at Vishnu and he said, I came with a desire for kingship and my father's favor. And now I realize that I've achieved this jewel, and everything that I wanted are just like broken pieces of glass. This is just the experience of the interpersonal experience and how it affects, how it transforms. So this is a part of the journey of the Bhagavat, part of the symphony that my friend said. And then in the 10th canto as well, there's the lovely story of the wives of the Brahmins where Krishna and Balaram were going around begging. They want something to eat. So they go to the Brahmins, and the Brahmins are preparing for the fire yajna, which is a very involved process, and there's a lot of purification involved. And two dirty little cowherd boys come, and they want something to eat. Go away. Go and talk to our wives. We're busy men doing important work. And then they go to the wives, and of course the wives look at Krishna and Balarama. They don't see dirty little boys. They see these beautiful, beautiful people. The word Krishna means all attractive. And everyone falls in love with Krishna. Everyone who has a little love in their heart, they fall in love with Krishna. So they fell in love with him, and they couldn't do enough. And it's just showing the focus on religion and religiosity and procedure over the possibility of a personal relationship and what that means. And the idea of being hard in the heart by focusing on the rules and being full of love by seeing what's before you. So again, the whole text is full of lessons, and the lessons are all to help us understand how love works and how love works in relation to God. But if you're reading the text, then you suddenly look to your wife or husband and realize, I don't act like that towards them, do I? It becomes very relevant, because what we're doing here in this world is practicing relationships. We're practicing a relationship that we could have with God according to this text. That's a very dynamic way of looking at the idea. And then, of course, there's the love of the gopis of Vrindavan. These gopis are young women. They fall in love head over heels with Krishna. He's about their age. When I say their age, they're 10, 11 years old. They're so in love with him that they'll do anything for him. They go to goddess Katyayani and pray at the bank of the Yamuna that they can all marry him, and they're all praying to marry him. Of course, they all can't marry him, but they don't care. They're just all so in love with him. And they all want to make arrangements for him. And then they go out in the middle of the night to have a dance with him on the moonlit night. And they have the rasa dance, the dance of love. And they all dance, and he's dancing with each of them individually at the same time because of their affection and love. But what they've done to go out in the middle of the night is they've given up everything. Because these gopis, a cowherd girl, is the lowest social element, shall we say. The lowest person in society. She's not a boy, so that's half of society gone. She's not educated in any way. She's just an agricultural worker. So she doesn't have much going for her, except getting married and having kids. But they've just given that up, because they've gone out with a boy in the middle of the night in the woods. And in this culture, then you've given up all prospects. And they gave it up without a second thought. And that's why the love of the gopis is considered to be the benchmark of love. This is how love works. So when Queen Kunti says to be materially exhausted, it means to be materially uninterested. It's not just I'm consciously giving up these things. You don't even think about it. You just give because of love. Now, how many of us have experienced that kind of love? And that's what the text is reflecting back to any of us who are reading it. And then finally, it's the I've already addressed finally. Its reception. It's beloved. The text is beloved of every branch of society. When I was just in Chennai just a few weeks ago, and someone was telling me about their village. They come from a village much like Nandakumara's village of Brahmins, and a lot of their children have gone to America, and they're very successful in the tech industry. But they come home every December to do a katha, a Bhagavat katha. Now these people are all Advaitins, they're all followers of Adi Sankara, but still this is their sadhana, this is their work, and they come from all over the world and they do this katha. This is only a small village, but it's so profound to them, and this is just in Chennai. And then you've got similar things going on in Braj, near Vrindavan, Mathura. You've got similar things going on. The whole idea of the dancing in Gujarat, the Garba. The Garba is all about the rasa dance. You see it everywhere in India. And it's the inspiration for the Bhakti movement. Now the Bhakti movement is very profound and very old, some thousands of years old, but it had a revival in the Middle Ages. And that revival, that movement is still moving. It's the Katha tradition, as I say, is growing. The commentarial tradition is growing. There's still commentaries coming out. This is very much a living tradition. And there's a growing kirtan tradition. The kirtan, the chanting of the name of God, is mentioned in the first chapter as a devotional process and mentioned again in the last chapter. So it becomes the recommended sadhana of the Bhagavat Purana. And that's one thing that sparked off the kirtan movement and the Bhakti movement, because all the Bhakti traditions, Surdas and Kabir, and even into Sikhism, they all use kirtan as a process because it's so easy. And the idea was, the Bhagavat was at the beginning of the age of Kali, where things were going to get a bit grim and a bit difficult. And people were going to become argumentative, and miscommunication was going to be the order of the day. So how do you practice religion when you hardly have any brain cells left? When it's very difficult to meditate, when it's very difficult to do yagyas and pujas, when you don't have that level of purity within yourself? And, well, just chant God's names. God's name and God are the same. So as soon as you chant the name, you're purified. You're connected with the spiritual. So you're becoming purified immediately without doing anything else. And anyone can do it, old person, young person, and even a dog can howl in the corner and participate. So this was the idea of kirtan. And so it has this tremendous global appeal. And I'd just like to mention one last thing in terms of how did the Bhagavat start? It started with Lord Brahma, creator of the universe, reciting 4 verses to his son Narada. And Narada recited these verses to Vyas. Now we say that Vyas is the author of the Bhagavat, but he's not. He's the compiler of the Bhagavat. And that's Krita, that's the word that's used in the Bhagavat itself, that he's the compiler, he brings it together. So he explains it to his son Sukadev, and in doing so he elaborates and comments. He's the first begins the commentarial tradition. Sukadev explains it to Sutta Goswami and elaborates. So now we're down from 4 verses to 14,500. Because Sutta explains it to the sages of Naimisharanya. So this is not only a living tradition, it's a living text. So this is still a living text, and this is the vibrancy. Thank you very much.
We have time for a couple of questions, should anyone have any. Any questions?
Or answers?
Hello. Maybe being the Kali Yuga, I am an example of an argumentative type.
I'm Irish, I'm all in.
Yeah, okay. So, I've always had a problem with this rejection of materiality, which I do associate with this kind of bhakti. Maybe you can help me out. You started out by telling us that we definitely have to get rid of all material attachments and all material desires, and only then are we fit for the spiritual insight and experience. I've found that this kind of rejection, this is just briefly to say that, is associated historically with a denigration of the body, a denigration of women, denigration of nature, this split between the body and the Atman, and say, no, let's just forget about the body. So help me out.
Yeah, I think maybe you and I, coming from an Abrahamic cultural background, that's exactly how we would read the text. And because we would read it as a scripture. But I think we have to understand that the text has a different intellectual base. It has a philosophical basis which the Bible doesn't have, or the Quran doesn't have. And that's a big difference in terms of how you interpret the text, that you can interpret it. So that idea of saying about the lineage and how it's developed in the commentarial traditions, it's open to interpretation, it welcomes interpretation. So I'd just say that at the beginning. But when it comes to materiality, it's not rejecting that, because materiality is a manifestation of God. It's our approach to materiality. There's nothing wrong with sexuality, there's nothing wrong with gambling. Gambling is part of the story. There's nothing, all these aspects are there. But how do we approach them? Do we do it at the cost of our ability to love? Our ability to be compassionate, to be tolerant, to be humble. And that's what it's saying. And if we decide that, no, I want to be more compassionate, then immediately our life choices diminish. Because I'm not going to choose to kill someone. I'm not going to choose to be nasty to my wife. So we restrict ourselves because we want to, for no other reason. So that's why it says, yatma suprasidati, the self must be completely satisfied, not screwed up. So it's not about leading us to guilt. Guilt is considered to be a very, in Indian psychology, considered to be a very negative emotion, and it's very selfish, actually. It's just about, what's going to happen to me, really. Shame, interestingly, is much more dynamic. Shame is when you realize you've done something to hurt someone and you resolve, therefore, not to do it again. And that's actually positive. That's considered to be positive. So the Bhagavatam is trying to inspire shame. It's trying to help us reflect on what we do and why we do it. Now, when we do that and we have a little breakthrough and we see, oh, I do that. I go and every time I think of God, I think, what can I get out of him? And then you feel a bit of shame and you think, that's a horrible way to treat anyone. I wouldn't treat anyone that I like. I wouldn't treat them like that. And how would I expect that person to receive me? Every time I see them, I just ask for stuff. What kind of relationship do I have? It's amazing that they take me seriously at all. So that kind of shame helps us introspect, and that's positive. And then we change how we proceed. But anything that leads us to guilt is negative. It's not good. So material energy is just a material energy. Let's treat it as we will, with respect. The text is all about the environment. The environmental theories that come from her, and Indian literature in particular, are astonishing. The respect it has for the environment and the idea that we have to be one with it. And it's not just about humans. The text is absolutely not speciesist, which is something that I think the world has to consider a bit more seriously in terms of environmental theory, purely, if that was the only reason. So thank you. A very, very good question that I personally relate to, and I had to go through a personal journey of weeding out all my misconceptions as well.
What would you say is the difference between guilt and shame? I could feel bad about something that makes me, I feel guilty of having done something that would give me feeling of shame, and that's how I can repair it or something.
Yeah,
But
Indian
difference-
psychology makes a distinction that guilt is selfish. Guilt is, I've done something wrong and I will be punished, and you feel really bad about it, so you do everything in your power to avoid punishment. So you go through a process of prayaschita. You go to a priest and say, I've done a wrong thing, is there any way out? And he says, yes. If you give me 1,500 rupees, I'll do a yajna, and we'll get a dispensation for you. So that's guilt. That's useless process, but very religious. So I won't talk against it. But that's what this text specifically says. That is material religion. That's just about you. It's about nobody else. It's not about the benefit of anyone else on the planet. You're only thinking about, I'm not talking about you. We are only thinking about ourselves when we do that kind of thing. Shame is when we realize, so for instance, I'll tell you a little story. This is a story about Mrs. Sharma from Chennai, and she used to come to Belfast in Northern Ireland where I lived. I had just been married for about 3 years. And I got married in an ashram to another member of the ashram, very spiritual people, all, bhakti. And Mrs. Sharma, I used to meet her, and she was a very nice lady. She had been married for 50 years before her husband died. And she said to me, I asked her, I said, was your marriage arranged? Now, my wife and I, our marriage was arranged. Now, in Ireland, my parents' marriage was also arranged. In Ireland, it's a normal thing. But I said to her, was your marriage arranged? She said, oh, yes. I was married at 15, had my first child at 16. And I said, oh, goodness. I said, and how did you find love? Did you fall in love with your husband? And she said, yes, I remember exactly when. And she had a little smile on her face. And I said, when? And she said, one day, shortly after they were married, he was leaving the house and he put something on a little table and he said, don't touch that. And he left the house. Now, in those days in India, if you left the house, it was a woman by herself, she wouldn't answer the door to anyone, so no one else was going to come. He came back, she was 16 years old. She immediately went over, picked it up, fell on the ground and broke. So she put the bits back on the table and waited for him to come home. And he came home, and he walked in, he looked at the thing, looked at her, knowing nobody else had been there, and turned around and walked away. And she said, that's when I fell in love with him. And I said, being a stupid Irishman, I had to say, explain. And she had a little smile on her face. She knew exactly what she was up to. And she said, because I was married to him, I had nowhere else to go if he had chastised me. I had no one to go to comfort me. So he protected me from that despair. And she said, and she realized what kind of a person he was, and immediately. And I was thinking, oh my God, I've been married now for 3 years. I haven't treated my wife like that at all. I was so ashamed. I was a guy living in an ashram. I was supposed to be the spiritual one. And this man had more character than I, and this was real. And that's shame. And that resolved in me. I immediately went home and told my wife the story so that I would be exposed as a charlatan and so that I could do something about it. And that's what shame, that's the value of shame. Shame is when you realize you've done something wrong, but you resolve to do something about it because it's impacted on someone else. So it's, learning how to love.
Thank you. Could I ask you a question? Could you please throw some light on Advaita and Bhagavat Purana?
Advaita and Bhagavat. Well, as I say, there's so many really good commentaries on the Bhagavat Purana by Advaitins. The very first commentary, in fact, by Sridhar Swami. It's so interesting. The Vaishnavas, they own Sridhar Swami, who was an Advaitin. They all refer to his commentary. And the Advaitins, of course, own him as well. Madhusudana Saraswati, another Vaishnava Advaitin. So they don't have a problem with this duality, the same one, the sectarian problem we have. They're reading a different text. So the idea of the text being non-sectarian is real when you read the commentaries. And some of the commentaries come out as sectarian, but if you read between the lines, it doesn't read like that at all. So Bhaktivedanta Swami's very famous commentary, very prolific commentary, but it gives credit to every tradition because the text does. You can't comment on the text and just say that this is the only way of looking at it, because the text from the very beginning doesn't say that. It says this is the highest truth for the benefit of all. So it's a completely different approach. So anyone who understands the Upanishads and the Vedas has the right to engage with these texts, has the right to comment on this text, has the right to own the text. So I mean, in Oxford, we encourage people to read all the commentaries. That's just good education. You know, and when they do, then they develop a more broad-minded approach. And interestingly, some of the students are practicing Advaitins, are Vaishnavas, but it just enhances their understanding. It's not about destroying their faith, it's about enhancing their faith, because their faith is based on philosophy, not sectarian ideology. And that's what the text is absolutely getting away from. So when we see different, you know, if I'm a Vaishnava and I'm looking at Advaita and doing a commentary, I'm saying, hang on a minute, this is my text. What a stupid, small-minded way of approaching the world. And how do I know that? Because I read the text. Yes.
Okay. I think we take both the questions together and then.
Okay. Just, you said about satisfying the self in your talk, and I kind of wondered whether a possible interpretation would be that first we have to satisfy the self that is an expansive self, a spacious self that is all-inclusive. So it's not the relative, delusional, constricted self, and that is the emptiness in which love can flow.
Yes, it's very, very good point. The self is talking about is the concept of Atma as discussed in the Upanishads. So it's about the most substantial part of ourselves. So the part of the Atman is the body, but it's not very substantial because it's only 80 years, 90 years. And then the mind is changing every 5 seconds. And the intellect is changing every time we read a book, watch a film, have a chat. So it's the part of the self that is substantial, that is enduring, that is eternal. So that's the self is talking about. That's the part that has to be satisfied. And that's the part that generally we starve. We ignore to nourish because we're so anxious to nourish the other parts and buy the latest thing and get the latest thing and watch the latest thing. So it's saying, no, this is the self. When this self becomes satisfied, you are truly satisfied.